Hello, good evening. Good to see you all. Thank you for coming out. I'm Javon. I teach in the School of Critical Studies, and we're so lucky to have the multi-talented Javon Johnson visiting us from Las Vegas this evening. He is Associate Professor of African American Studies at UNLV. A three-time National Poetry Slam champion, Javon's work dazzles both on the stage and on the page. He is the author of the poetry collection Ain't Never Not Been Black, which Button Poetry published in 2020. He also published the 2017 study, Killing Poetry, Blackness in the Making of Slam and Spoken Word Communities, a book that places the making of art and culture at its center. Indeed, in Killing Poetry, Javon says, quote, I am not a researcher who does art, but an artist who has decided to research creative communities, end quote. This special position of artist, researcher, ethnographer has allowed Javon to formulate a number of important insights. This is one of my favorites. Quote, the radicalism of slam and spoken word communities is located in our ability not to seek back to power, but to imagine beyond traditional power structures, even when we are caught up in them. It lies not in our desire to alter structures, but in our desire for structural alterity in our ways and spaces, how we creatively and continually work toward beyond the beyond, wherever that is, end quote. I like to think of Killing Poetry and Ain't Never Not Been Black as part of a larger autoethnographic work that draws on a variety of multidisciplinary practices to think through how we might go beyond our dystopian present into the utopian future. While we can't yet locate beyond beyond, I love that phrase, Javon's poetry suggests that we might be able to echo-locate it through the resources of sound. His poem, Black and Happy, begins, quote, on the night they decided not to indict Dameron Wilson for the cold-blooded murder of Mike Brown, I, a well-framed riot, chose not to protest. Instead, I shut down everything and, like any good gospel conductor, demanded a better harmony, end quote. This is to suggest that while we might not know where beyond the beyond is, we can intuit what its alternative politics might sound like. So let's welcome Javon Johnson and let's listen up.
How y'all doing? Y'all all right?
It's clear.
All right. So that was blah energy. How y'all doing? Y'all good? All right. So here's the deal. Thank you first and foremost, Michael, for inviting me out, and also for I think what that wonderful not think, but the really wonderful introduction that you offered up. Just sort of very generative. I was going to start with a poem, but the introduction sort of jogged me back. I was telling Michael earlier, I am this again, I always try to tell people I'm really an artist more than I'm an academic, and so I kind of just I just kind of go with the flow, and that served me well. A lot of times in academia, and other times it is not, but oh well, we'll live. But what I'll do is I was writing some notes on the plane here, and I'll sort of just dig into those notes really quickly and see if this makes sense. And it's really wonderful that you capture, I think, Michael, the notion of autoethnography. My MA, I did it at Cal State LA, and my master's thesis advisor, Brian Keith Alexander, is really, really huge in autoethnography. And so my first sort of early methodological training is quite precisely in autoethnography. Yeah, and just thinking about that and really sort of invested in poetics, right? So the next project is actually tentatively titled The Poetics of Blackness. On God, subtitle on God, on my mama, and everything I love. And for those of us who get that reference, we get that reference, right? But the point that I'm ultimately making here is it looks at the ways in which I think Blackness is inherently a process of ongoing poetics, right? And the ways in which Black folks show up in these sort of really profound poetic ways that doesn't always register in white ways of knowing. And so that's what it unpacks. And so what we're tracking here then is that I'm clearly invested in some kind of Black poetics or poetics of Blackness. So I'll start with this, and then like I said, I was just writing some notes, and we'll see if these notes make sense. We'll do some poems, we'll do some Q&A, and then we'll air hug, and for a second, all will be right in the world, hopefully. So this is it, right? So I always tell people, I am nothing more than a love poem. No matter what I write, all I write are love poems. And the reason why I say this is, I began writing in late 1990s. I'm from South Central Los Angeles, right? 80s, 90s, South Central Los Angeles, height of the gang epidemic, height of the crack epidemic, right? And I say all this to say, I began writing then a girl in high school, and I always, it's weird telling this story now because I'm now a man talking about dating a girl, and I know that was I was a boy then, but it's still very, I'm working through that process in my own head. But the point that I'm making is there was a girl in high school that I thought was very pretty. She came up to me out of nowhere, and she was like, Javon, I heard you write poems. And, you know, I was a high school boy in the 90s, very concerned with my manhood, whatever that meant at the time. And I was about to tell her that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But before I could do that, she was like, God, it's so sexy that you write poems. And I immediately was like, what's up, girl? I'm like, oh. So this is an entirely true story. I immediately was like, yeah, I write poems. I got you, say less. And I had the option that night of going home of becoming a writer or a poet, and I was like, I think I gotta write a poem. And I wrote her a terrible love poem, something that she absolutely loved. The only line that I can remember from it is that her eyes were like the moon. I don't know what that means. I still don't know what that means. I plan on writing a collection of poems called Her Eyes Are Like the Moon one day and try to investigate what I meant, but who knows, who cares, right? The point that I'm ultimately making is I began quickly, I went to Crenshaw High School, so all the people in high school started paying me money to write poems for them so that they can go on dates, right? Or they could ask someone to prom or to homecoming or whatever dance. And what that taught me was that in a world that disenfranchises Black voices, that mine had value. And it was a clear monetary value at that time. So I began to write about other things, right? Beyond just love, right? So-called love, right? I began to write about police brutality. I began to write about poverty. I began to write about drug abuse, gang violence, systemic disenfranchisement. I began to write about my issues with sexism in the church. I began to write about so many things. I was raised by a Black mother and was listening to preachers telling me that Black women are the problem with the community. I was like, it's not my experience. I don't know how to deal with that, right? I began to write about a bunch of things that I didn't always know how to name, but I knew them to be true in my bones, right? And in this way, poetry allowed me to become an author, but in many ways also authoritative over my own life. And so I always tell people, look, I only write love poems because all I write are about things that I love, and I write for people that I love, and about people that I love, a world that I think I want to exist. I'm sure, at least I hope I will love. And it makes sense that I call myself that because James Baldwin, in his very short essay, The Creative Process, at the end of it says, societies never know it, but the war of an artist with his society is a lover's war. And he does, at his best, what lovers do, which is to reveal the beloved to himself, and with that revelation, make freedom real, end quote, right? And it's at the very end. This is at the tail. This is the literally thing that Baldwin leaves us with. This is the closing line of this essay, that what artists do is engage in a lover's world of war with the very world in which we live. The artist, what Baldwin calls the incorrigible disturber of the peace, disrupts, throws into panic the order and stability that a delusional society rests on to maintain the very peace that it claims to maintain. And here, I want to think about like Ngudi Wafion, those pinpoints, gunpoints, and dreams. If we've not read that, right? So the core of it is this idea that the state uses gunpoints to enforce their dreams, while artists use pinpoints to imagine dreams that exist beyond the state enforcement, which puts artists inherently at war with the state, right? Think of Plato's role of the poet in the Purple Republic. They must go, right? He says they must be gone, right? But thus, to return to Baldwin, the conquest of the physical world is not only man's duty, writes Baldwin. He is also enjoined to conquer the great wildernesses of himself, right? The precise role of the artist then is to illuminate that darkness, blaze roads through the vast forest, so that we will not, in all our doing, lose sight of its purpose, which is, after all, to make the world a more human dwelling place. And in this way, the artist's job is to make the world more livable, right? That is not simply bogged down by the illusion or even delusion of a stable world established by those of that which is in control. Because the artist must know and must let us know that none of this is stable. None of it. Not even the project of human itself. And this conquest of the physical and internal wildernesses for Baldwin is that what pushes us towards a higher level of consciousness, right? Which is, quote, the only hope we have now or in the future of minimizing human damage, end quote. But perhaps, I think, maybe Baldwin makes possible for us to think about human damage not simply as the damage caused by humans, but also the damage that is human. That is all the damage done in the name of human project. And the artist's job is to rebel against even the stable notion of human itself, right? Ultimately, the reveal that Baldwin leaves us with, the reveal that would make freedom real, with all the vulnerabilities and power and love and beauty and possibility, is that which shows the wild, the untamable self, right? And I'm gesturing that what I try to do in my own work is to disturb the boundaries. What I try to do in my own work is to expose the facade of the stable, to challenge order, so as to make space for the so-called wild, right? I hope that little write-up that I was doing, I was really working with Baldwin's ideas, and I wanted to share that with you before I jumped into the poem. I think I'm going to do 3 poems. We'll start, and then we'll just sort of take it from there and see how we feel in the world. I'm going to start. I was talking with Michael. I have a 20-month-year-old. I hate saying that, 20 months. She's almost 2. After 1, you get years with me. So she's incredible. She's really phenomenal. She's dope. She's feisty. And the school is like, she's feisty. And I'm like, oh well, because the world hates girl children, and she might need to be a little feisty, and that's okay for me right now. But she's really smart. But most parents say that about their children, and so maybe she is, maybe she isn't. Who knows? But she's smart to me. She's really, what I really love most about her is that she's bold. She tries things, and I'm just really amazed at her willingness to say, screw it, I'll try to walk up and down stairs at even the earliest of ages, even when you can tell that she's very frightened by height, she still pushes herself. And I love this about her, right? I'm going to do 3 poems about my daughter. One is a poem I wrote maybe 15 years ago, well before I knew I was going to have a child. Everything in me said my first child would be a girl child, what we call a girl child, right? I kind of knew this. I don't know why I knew this, but everything knew it. So I'll read that. And then I'll transition to one that I wrote while she was in her mother's belly, right, in the womb. And so I'll read that, and then I'll read one that I wrote for her while she's here, right? So a poem, a series of poems about my daughter in various stages. She also has a big head, which I really think is so dope. She just like, it's like she walks around. I'm like, look at this, it's incredible. It's super funny. She's super funny. It's called A Letter to My Unborn Daughter. What was happening, I should say at the time, a lot of poor friends were writing poems about their children, and I didn't want to be left out. But I also didn't want to have kids at the time. So I was like, I'll write a poem and save the money. And so that was my trade-off because they're expensive. All right, poem. Baby girl, you should know that your dad only knows two options. He knows go hard or go home. He knows nothing in between. You'll soon learn that your dad loves this way. You'll have a hard time understanding how anyone in this world could ever call me mean. Not my dad, you'll say. He's the kindest man in the world. Someday you'll come to understand that I reserve the sweetest parts of myself just for you. See, on random nights, we will slow dance together till we both tire out and fall asleep. Some mornings, we will dress in our finest clothes and go wherever you like. We will share inside jokes so big that you can imagine the forever on them. And every morning on your birthday, I will wake up and sing a song that I wrote for you the day before. This will be really cute up until the time you turn 18 and I show up to your college dorm. Your friends will say, your dad's a bit much, and you'll be like, yeah, he is. But it's the best way to be loved. Baby girl, you should understand that there are drawbacks to this kind of love. When you go on your first date, I will be there. I will put my arm around this person, whisper softly in their ear whatever you do to her, I'll gladly do to you. You both should know that your dad spent like 2 days in jail, and he's comfortable with all kinds of shit. Listen, baby girl, if you want to go around wearing those short shorts with your ass hanging out, guess what your dad's going to do? That's right, he's going to buy himself a pair, and our asses are going to hang out together. We'll see how cute you think it is then. And if you want to go around sleeping with all the guys in the room, guess what? Your dad, he's also going to go around. He's also going to sleep with all. Okay, listen, baby girl, a few things first. First things first, your dad took us to a place that made us both uncomfortable, and for that he's incredibly sorry. Second, your dad's not going to sleep with a bunch of people in the world because it's not his thing. And honestly, it's not that anything's wrong with that because, see, honestly, baby girl, when two people love each other, the way your mother and I do, and if I'm really being honest, it's not always about love. You know what? Go talk to your mother about this shit. I never wanted to have this conversation with you in the first place. 3, baby girl, daddy understands the problems with slut shaming. Knows the issues too well with men and calling women whore and slut. It's about their own sexism and patriarchy. It's about insecure men who are too afraid of women owning their own body. And your dad wants you to own your own body. I want you to know what it's like to live life as if humans were made to jump out of airplanes without parachutes. I want you to be everything you need to be in this world. Be a rolling ball of butcher knives. Be a wild trigger pistol with no safety. Be a bad mother. Learn how to say no and mean it. Learn how to say yes and mean it. Be as loud as the day you were born and mean it. I cannot wait to sing the first song to you. Look who's just born, screaming like a crazy horn. I don't even know what that means. Thank you very much. I normally say this and I forgot to, but so I am a real high energy performer, but I can't give you all my energy without you give this all back. So that means if I say something in the middle of a poem makes you want to laugh, clap, yell, holler, high five, by all means do so. I'm not telling you have to. I'm saying by all means, if you feel compelled to, by all means do so. I also think I'm one of the funniest people alive. I invite you to join in on that belief. You don't have to. If you want to be mean, by all means be mean. But, you know, join if you want. I personally think I'm hilarious. I'm fully hilarious. I do wild stuff all the time. I have very strong takes about the most irrelevant things in the world. Yeah. People are like, what's wrong with you? My mother called me and said, what's wrong with you? I said, you crazy. She needs to own up to what she's done. I'm gonna do this poem. The second poem. When Glenn Rice grabbed the last rebound at the end of Game 6 of the 2000 NBA Finals to put away Reggie Miller's Pacers, a then full hair, 21-year-old Kobe Bean Bryant jumped in Shaquille O'Neal's arms. The Mamba went from hugging the big man around the neck like a clingy toddler to throwing both arms in the air. Kobe's legs around Shaq's waist. The giant, almost in tears, held him tightly with both arms. And this is honestly just a story of two grown men holding one another. The way I think all men really want to be held, especially those of us who cannot say so. That was a good time for us LA boys. Master P owned the airwaves then, and what is a No Limit record except for a hood soundtrack for black children who dare to dream is that they are bigger than everything they've ever known. My uncle used to pile the neighborhood boys into a brown Ford Fairline station wagon. He tried to turn us into a basketball team. All of us dreamed that we would make it to the NBA someday. None of us ever did. He ran drills as if he was still in the military, which makes sense then because everyone kept calling South Central a war zone. When my Lakers won, battalions of purple and gold flooded the streets, and a Celtics jersey became a landmine, and the way we laughed at Clippers fans meant that it was difficult to tell a hero from a terrorist. Some people went outside to shoot their guns into the night sky, and it reminded me that this country becomes this country by shooting into the dark. But when my Lakers won, my uncle called and saved my life. He said we did it, which sounded a lot like I love you. And I believed him, and I still do. See, basketball is a black boy's love language. A Magic Johnson's fast break is still one of the sweetest things you can say to me. A Kareem skyhook is proof that God indeed answers prayers. And Nick Van Exel's dribbling is still the prettiest love song next to Whitney's version of I Will Always Love You. So when my Lakers won that title, I got down on bended knee and thanked the Lord back. When folks still talked at the end of R&B songs, when Tony blatantly lied to us about the rain in Southern California, Boys to Men preached slow sermon after slow sermon, and so many of us were conceived to that holy sacrilege of black sound, and now my wife and I are expecting our first child. And I am already so willing to die for her. For this little human being I have yet to even meet. This does not make me a good father. It only means I barely established a baseline. A low bar indeed, but isn't that what did my father in? His drinking, how he searched for the gospel of Paul in nearly every well. And I wish I could tell you more, but I choose to make my memory of him a bit foggy, but isn't that what did Kobe Bryant in? The weather, the crash, and I think of his death and how it allows so many of us to only remember the good of him. And I think maybe even I wish my father had died a long time ago. Not because I want him dead, but because I only want to remember the good of him. And this is really just a story of two grown men who've never held each other, who can't ever remember sharing a love language. Towards the end of her life, my father's mother began to lose her memory. Her mind, the San Andreas fault line, and her face would crumble whenever she could not remember my name. One time, instead of admitting memory loss, she made up a story about how we had dinner to soothe my breaking heart. We both know the truth. We both played along anyway, and I'm still not sure who benefited more, but I think of family this way. I imagine our baby would be an earthquake of a child. Hopefully, she will know exactly how to rumble, how to erupt, how to rumble, how to crack foundation. Hopefully she will have an attitude like her great grandmother's cooking, too much spice for most people's stomach, but we like it that way. And she'll tell you that breaking ground is the only way to build mountains. I worry I won't be a good enough father. I'm worthy of a girl child born in a pandemic and how that breaks me. The lack of control. And I worry how no matter how hard I try, someday there might be a mountain between her and I. The same one I refuse to remove from my own father. I worry that I might become him. That she'll run from home the same way I did, but I still miss this city. Maybe she'd love Los Angeles the way I do. Maybe we'll hold one another tightly. like memories forever until they are not? Thank you. Okay, last poem about my big-headed child. She's aggressive. She hit me the other day. She full-on swung and laughed. I was like, if I didn't know everything I knew about like how brains develop, I would think that was intentional. She fully hit me and laughed. I was like, you've been here before. That's what I told her. This is called pound cake. A traditional pound cake, which is easily one of my favorite desserts. It's not even close. It's buttery and delicious when done right. My sister-in-law made pound cake at Thanksgiving, last Thanksgiving, and it stayed on the counter, so she's unable to make pound cake again. It's the way black folk. It's really black people, the way we look at other people's food when it ain't right. It's just, we have to do that. There'd be a whole essay written in this where everybody was like, who made that? Like, you know who made that. No. As my sister came over, who made this pound cake? Like, why are you being loud about our pound cake? My sister-in-law felt bad. She shouldn't have made that pound cake. A traditional pound cake requires exactly 1 pound each of flour, sugar, butter, and eggs. Flour gives structure. Wheat flour contains proteins that interact with each other when mixed with water, forming gluten. It is this elastic gluten that stretches to contain the expanding leavening gases during the cake's rise. And sugar, of course, sweetens. But it also helps to keep your cake soft and moist. When the sugar meets the water, it locks in that moisture, making the cake tender, deepening the flavor and color, and gives that nice crunch at the top. Butter, a fat, provides flavor, but also moistens the cake, while eggs interacting with the flour provides heightened texture as well as adding color. My mother taught me how to make a proper pound cake when I was less than 10 years old. Sometimes we had to beat it by hand, mixing all the ingredients to ensure it would raise right, but being careful to never over whip. I'm going to pass this tradition down to my own daughter to show her the old ways, but I'm worried about what it means that we teach our children that we must beat things to provide them structure. I was in middle school when I was whipped to the point that it left scars on my body I can see to this day. My parents ensured me it had to be done to give me structure, to make certain that I would be a sweet child, raised right, In my family, when we talk of physical punishment, the generation before loves to tell us how they had it so much worse, how we have it so much better now, that they did not do to us what their parents did to them. The word heirloom come from the words heir and loom in Old and Middle English. Loom is literally a tool, so I guess my scars were passed down to help me build up my own child. When the elementary school bully revealed that he was in an abusive household, it made sense that he thought himself a tool to pound, to strike with blunt force everyone around him. Early science believed tools were that which separated humans from other animals, which means he used violence given to him. His parents came to school and whipped him in front of everyone. His mother repeatedly told him, I'll beat the black off of you, to add color. She had multiple versions of the pound, the belt, the switch, the backhand. My mother also had multiple versions, one with 7-Up, one with cream cheese, and another with a hint of lemon. Purists say that these alternative ingredients make it something other than the pound cake. They say it's weird that we have come accustomed to calling 2 different things by the same name. When I tell people that I will not hit my child, they say spanking and beating are not the same things. I say it's weird that we are now willing to give the same thing to different names. When I tell people I will not hit my child, they snicker and laugh as if somehow we are the joke. When I tell people that I will not hit my child, I mean I want to be her safe space. I want to be her prayer. I want to be her life raft in the face of the iceberg, the warm blanket, and the lighthouse that guides her back to the shore. I mean, I want to be her shore. I mean, sometimes my daughter places her head in the cave of my chest. I mean, sometimes she falls asleep there. I mean, I want her to know that every part of me will always be a home for her. I mean, I want her to be colorful, sweet, and well-raised, I mean, I guess I'm trying to say, I want to find another way of baking the cake. without having to be it. Thank you. Are we still good? Yeah? All right, here we go. So writing is a process where we place sentences in a proper sequence, right? Whenever a single sentence is read aloud, it should be easily comprehensible. Clear and concise sentences are almost always preferable. Example, Javon smiles. See? Javon is the proper noun in that sentence, but can be easily replaced by the noun boy. Smiles is the action verb. It does something in the world. If you want to get fancy and color that sentence up, you throw in an adjective just before the noun. Adverbs, on the other hand, should always follow the verb in which they use to describe. Example, the black boy smiles largely. See? It should be noted that in this poem, the black boy is the sentence, not the sentenced. The black boy should not be a lesson in court construction or how the judicial system railroads black families. In this poem, the black boy is the subject, the sentence, the object. The object lesson here being is that our courts construct their sentences opposite grammatical law. It is incorrect for a judge to state, I'm going to go with the state's recommendation and sentence you to X amount of years. Rather, whenever we consider an event that have occurred to be unfinished and therefore always happen again, we should use perfect present tense conjugation. In this way, a judge might better state the state has been recommending and been sentencing the black boy for years. I used to think, I wanted to conquer the world. Like any mediocre white man we later called great, I thought my life too worthy of a state-sanctioned monument. I used to believe in the American dream and blind justice. Years ago, I testified in court as a character witness for a friend because I thought all my fancy degrees would matter. The judge gave him a decade for a felony he likely did not commit, but even if he did, what exactly does that sentence say? What exactly does that sentence mean? His mother wept uncontrollably. The court, a musty Klan's robe before they took him away. He turned to us shackled, but the black boy could not smile. The black boy could not smile. The black boy could not. Isn't that the proper sentence? Clear, concise, yet somehow still too long, like the sentences black folk are always given. However, it is incorrect to say that the black boy was jailed. It is passive. It lacks a subject. Who jailed the black boy? The racist system jailed him partially. See the placement of the adjective, noun, verb, and adverb. See who's doing all the action here. See no mention of the black girl. How easily she is erased. See exactly how they teach us to construct a proper sentence. Thank you very much. We're good, we're still good, yes. We'll leave a few minutes at the end for some Q&A and all that will be good. So jot up some questions. I really like Q&A. And then I'll probably end with a poem or two and then everything. Cool, we're good, yeah? All right, yes, I'm gonna do this. Okay, we are in the race portion of the poem, of the reading. All right. Yes, I'm gonna do this, okay. Yes. I am told it took me longer, I am told, you see that was my VCR for those of us who know what a VCR is. I am told it took me longer than normal to unclench my fist as a newborn child. My mother says this is how she knew her baby boy was to be a fighter. When I was 7 years old, I had broke a kid's arm in 2 places after my older brother had made me fight that kid again. By the time I was 10, I was champion for knocking other kids unconscious on a football field. When I was in middle school, I averaged no less than about 3 fights per month most. I can't even remember why. By the time I got to high school, I fought some more. I was shot at a few times. I kicked the kid down the stairs and choked another with my bare hands. I'm not entirely sure you understand why I tell you this. I am not happy about any of this. I want desperately to perform a healthier masculinity. But this world has never allowed me to unclench my fist. I was 21 years old in Mississippi
when a truck full of white guys drunk on Confederate flags called me a nigga. I remember wanting to show them how much of a nigga I could be. So I put my back up against the wall. I clenched my fist and told them to do what you gotta do. I needed them to know that these hands are rated E for everybody. And I know just how much white boys love to play catch. Just then, a cop car pulls up and asks them if I was causing trouble. Later, I tell a good college buddy of mine, and he says, good Lord, Javon, you know how easily you could have been hurt. I think to myself, ain't that just like a white boy to remind me of all the ways I could be hurt? So I wonder how different was my college buddy from the cop, both of them from the boys, and the boys are always around. So my uncle taught me to walk circumspectly and to swing these hands like good scripture. Once he told me, and I quote, if someone ever tests you, pray, but remind that nigga of the rapture. So I swear I'm only up here trying to do God's work. But when my niece tells me I am the best uncle in the world, something I am absolutely certain she tells all of the uncles. I know it is not my fists, but the way they bloom into flowers that makes her say this. To garden is to dig your hands beneath the soil and pray something beautiful springs up. They say dandelions, though commonly disregarded as weeds, are completely edible sources of vitamin A, and this teaches me that even an unwanted thing can be useful too. And I pray someday this unwanted black boy can feel safe enough to break open for someone else's help. But I know roses have thorns because there are those who pick flowers simply because they can. And this is the difference between white masculinities and black masculinities. Some days I am a flower, others I am a shear, but every day I am vulnerable at being broken at the stem or labeled a weapon that must be destroyed. I was 35 when a white colleague told me my anger friends. I was 35 when my white male colleague's passion inspires her. I was 35 and a said, do you know how easily we can have you arrested? I was 35, minding my business, walking down the street, to which a white woman said, do you have to be so loud? To which I responded, do you have to be in Oakland? I was 35, ready. I was ready to break somebody wide open. Well, I was 35 when my niece grabbed me by the face with both of her hands. She said, Uncle, you're so silly. She said, you're always so silly. And I think I want desperately to forever be the flower, you know? Fully bloomed, no thorns. But all right, we still good? That's all right. This is an entirely true story to that white colleague that I'm talking about. I can't make any of these up. Academia is a wild place. I'm going to tell y'all a very true story. This is because I'm also petty, and I go to a therapist and I'm trying to get better and not be as petty. But a little petty goes a long way sometimes. And so this is a true story. So I was proposing a new class. I was trying to put it on the curriculum, right? And I was just the chair of the curriculum committee. So I was like, hey, I have to do this in a rush because I know the date is coming up that if I miss this date, we can't get it on the books until next year. Is there a way that we can rush this through curriculum committee? I'm off the curriculum committee now. She's the chair. I go, the chair of the entire department. I go, hey, she said that she'll help us fill out the form because I'm not entirely sure. I'm still a new faculty member at this point. I'm not entirely sure the exact boxes to check. Our chair said she'll help us fill out the form, but just look at the content, the mock syllabi is there, whatever, right? She goes, cool. She reads it over, emails me back. I can't make this up. We go, hey, I noticed some typos. Is our chair? Is she gonna help me on that too? I was like, oh, we're gonna be that person. This is good to know. So what I did was, this is the woman I'm talking about in that poem. So what I did was I took some time out of my day. I went to the library, checked her book out, photocopied the pages with typos, and emailed it to the entire department. including the graduate students. I said, maybe we should all get some type of help. She said, I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. This is when she wrote me like 4. No one writes a 4-paragraph apology. The way she did, it was like 4 paragraphs in an email. I am in tears. I'm not gonna have this with you. You're wrong. I stopped talking to her. I didn't talk to her again after that. I don't recommend these practices because I could have easily been non-tenured over this.
That's true.
But oh well, here we are. I felt good that day. Yes. Oh, I felt so good. She saw me in the hallway. She's like, I'm so sorry. That's who I am. I do a lot of stuff. All right, here we go. I'm going to do this one. When the cancer comes, the experts will gather. They will say things like, I'm afraid there's bad news. This is not a death sentence. People live long lives. We are doing everything we can, but there is not an exact science to this. You will hear bad news. You will think to yourself, this is a death sentence. You will think humans are everything, but not this. Cancer is when the abnormal cells grow and spread very quickly. Sometimes these cells group together, forming tumors, causing damage to healthy parts of the body. Often, those cells break apart, causing more damage to other healthy parts of the body. And this is the best definition of gentrification that I have. I live in Oakland, where they're tearing down old black bodies quicker than they could build up new high-rises. Death by crooked cop or crooked crane is all the same. Gentrification is killing us. When the new Oakland residents call the cops on a drum circle filled with people of color, they are trying to stop the heartbeat when they call the cops on the black church, which had been there for 65 years for being too loud on a Sunday. They are trying to strip Oakland of its soul. To gentrify is to take the body and gut it. It is to treat the entire city like a chop house. And those butchers have no manners. They do not pray over the slaughter. They do not even have the decency to make use of the entire carcass. They simply toss out the bones as if there's no need to season the stock. There is no God in this. My stepfather was. Before that, he was a football coach. And before that, he was a truck driver who delivered food items. He was a man who took care of those who were not his own. He was a high young man who thought he could sing. We let him sing anyway, because we knew soon his voice would go the same way of the house he raised us in. All memory. No longer ours, no longer here. When my mother called me to tell me of his lymphoma, that he has a few months left to live. For some weird reason, I immediately thought of the newly built high-rise just up the street for mixed-income families. I thought to myself, the city does not care that the low-income families will not be able to afford a $5 cup of coffee or to shop at the Whole Foods. The cancer does not care that the body will not be whole or that the body has a family. The city does not care about black families, that the only space we have made to call our home have been made to feel strange and foreign and out of place, that at this rate, we will have to lower our dead into grounds they could not afford to live on. At some point, mixed income housing only prolongs the inevitable, and this is the best definition of chemotherapy that I have. Meanwhile, my stepfather passed, and no one seemed to ask the important questions like how did we get here, and why is the body eating itself alive? I am a broken player in a burned out church house. Without him, I never would have made it, which is to say I am black and I am scared, and this is exactly what the cancer does when I play football for my stepfather. And we lost our semifinal game. And I made my fist into 2 small wrecking balls waiting for any new project to get into. He said, yeah, I know this one hurts. Cry it out if you have to, but you gotta keep your head up. You gotta figure out a way to get him next time. He is everything I can tell you about gentrification. Everything I know about what happens when the cancer finally comes. I'll say this, and then whatever questions we have, we can talk a little bit. My stepfather was my guy. So I don't have, obviously, as you can tell from the earlier poem, I don't have a relationship with my biological father at all, but my stepfather was this really, really amazing human being that I was fortunate to be partially raised by. He used, I can't make this up, but he used to coach. He was wearing these short shorts that came like right here. And so he'd be talking to me, yelling and stuff. And yeah, I'm like, I just touched his thigh, like, it's a lot of thigh, man. What's wrong with you? I was like, I'm just saying. You got a lot of little action showing. He's my guy. When he, again, this is who I am in my family. When he was passing, literally in the bed, we all go home, we're all crying, in tears. And he tells everybody, we're all sitting in the room. He goes, hey, I didn't know, but I took a life insurance policy out on me. It's not much. Just want to make sure I leave y'all with something, and hopefully, you'll do something smart with the money. And da 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 da. And I go, and we're in tears. And I go, no, fuck that. I'm buying rims. I'm putting rims on rims, and they gonna spam him. And he started busting up laughing. He's like, yo, what is wrong with you? And then we called everybody back in individually. The one thing I share with people that he did tell me, we talked for a while in that room individually. It was tough, but it was beautiful, it was loving, it was amazing, it was vulnerable. It was everything I think I needed for me to be at peace with his going. He did say, he goes, hey, listen, I love that you make people laugh even in the hardest of moments. If you keep them laughing, they're gonna need that. And that's my guy. I miss him dearly, but here we are. Poem, not poem, question and answer session. Yeah, we're good. I'm good. Any questions? Any comments, thoughts, concerns? Do you need Jeopardy music? Yes.
Just hearing what you're saying up there, like you're speaking about family a lot, and I'm just wondering, well, what your zodiac sign is, and why also, what if you feel like you want to expand on the family.
Yeah. I'm a Virgo. Apparently I'm a triple Virgo. I don't know what that means. I don't really read. Okay, bye. Satan. Is that a good thing? Being a Virgo? Okay. I thought y'all were saying like Jesus Christ. Just like, yeah, we're gonna sprinkle holy water on them. I thought y'all were excising me.
Satan
Okay.
is a purple Scorpio.
Okay. I go. You started this. This is your podcast. So I don't know a terrible amount about zodiac signs. I do know the little bit that I know for Virgo. I'm pretty typical. As Virgos go. My apologies are like you should have listened to me the first time I told you. I'm sorry, you chose wrongly. But I am much better at apologizing than I used to be. Because that for sure used to be my go-to. Like, I told you what to do. And now your situation is what it is. But no, family for me, I think a lot about a good friend of mine and a colleague, Marlon Bailey, writes a book called Rich Queens Up in Pumps. ballroom culture in Detroit. Marlon, you know Marlon, he's also from Detroit. He's also from Detroit, and he came up in the ballroom culture in Detroit. And he writes about ballroom culture, and he's writing a lot about in this kinship structure, right? Because ballroom houses recreate kinship structures, right? And some level. And one of the things he talks about is the importance of them. One of the reasons is that if the Black family house, a family in its healthy capacity, right? This doesn't say all families are healthy, because I love what Karen Thompson says in her book of Relocations, that the nuclear family can be as toxic as it sounds. But to think about the nuclear family in its healthy sense, right? Or the family in general. I'm not even talking about the nuclear family. The family in general. The Black family is one of the few spaces that Black folks can go that becomes a safe haven from white supremacy. And so the Black family structure for a lot of us is a very hard thing. Like I know a lot of queer and trans Black folk who had a hard time letting go of unhealthy family members because it's one of the few spaces that Black folks have to escape a lot of the perils of the world. I am fortunate that even with all of my issues and weirdnesses is in quotations here for my family, right? This strong Christian. My stepfather was a pastor. I remember he was a first lady at the church, and I'm like, I don't know my God, John. And they're like, what the you're going? And my pastor was very nervous, and rightfully so, right? If their teachings tell them that my thoughts are going to send you to hell, I get why my mother and father are concerned. But I say to say, even with all of my weirdnesses, all of the things they couldn't understand about me, my family was beautiful in the way in which they held that. And so, family for me was, it is that safe haven. I haven't lived in South Central for years, but it is by far the safest space I know. By far, and it's not close. Even with all of its problems, I am going to leave here when we go, and I am going to the hood. And I'm going to rest, and it's going to feel great, and it's going to feel like everything I've ever known. And so this is why family is so important to me. I was also raised by my uncle, my great uncle, my great aunt. I lived with my grandmother some summers, right? And so one of the things we know to be true, the nuclear family is a relatively new construction. Right, the families often lived in multiple generations and multiple kinds of families, often and still do, depending on your immigrated background, your class background, whatever, multiples in households, right? And that was certainly the case for me, to the point that me and my mom and my uncle, our brother, are so close that all of the children are close. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's my sister cousin, right? And meaning like she's close to me like a sister. Right? Kind of things. So it's that, right? I just have like everything about them, even with all of my issues with my family. I'm like, I get on my nerves, but I love y'all so much. I don't always like them, but I absolutely love them. I'm nuts about them. And they've saved me over and over and over again. Yeah.
So first, thank you so much for bringing all that you brought here to us at CalArts. You started off by talking about how all of your poems are love poems. And I wanted to just ask you even more, what for you can poetry do?
Mm-hmm.
And especially because you're both a poet and a scholar and working in the academy where there are these other kinds of writing and research that people do, like what can poetry specifically do?
I think there's so many answers, I think, that I can answer this in a lot of ways. On a personal level, like even right now, it allows me to explore the vulnerable parts of myself that historical understandings of masculinity has denied. Right? The ability to sit here and tell you that I am scared that I won't be a good enough father. That alone is a hard thing to grapple with. It is something that I wrestle with on a regular basis, where I worry about being a good enough parent to this child, right? I have ideas of parenting, but as we know, because we were all children, our parents' ideas of parenting don't always jive with who we are. And I'm like, how do I My mom did the best she could do. My mom was utterly amazing at the best she could do. And yet, there are moments she failed so miserably because she's human and still has an inability to reconcile it. I want to be able to reconcile with my failures. And I think poetry allows me a space to think about the reconciliation. Because I know I will fail hard. And that's this is going to make me emotional. I know I'm going to fail much out at some point. And it's through this creative writing that I've been able to get to another space to be okay with that. Not okay in the sense like, yeah, I'm gonna fail well, but okay with the sense of I'm human. I'm gonna try my best. I'm gonna always try to be better the next day than I was the day before. But I want to be able to reconcile those moments that my parenting doesn't jive with the person that she is, because we're different people. So at its core, it's allowed me to feel. In a way that again, historical trappings of masculinity denies allow us. As much as, and this is not a competition thing when I say this, we talk a lot about in certain spaces what patriarchy and sexism do to women and non-binary folk, and rightfully so. Center that. That's fine. I'm not moving the center in any kind of way. In my classes around masculinity, I talk too about what it does to boys. It wreaks havoc on boys and men. And even everything that I know about it still wreaks havoc on me. I was just talking to my partner about this last night. I was like, I'm sorry. I really actively work against these things. I actively, and she knows that I do. And there are moments it traps me. And so the poetry allows me a way out of that. And it allows me to grow. It allows me to, because we think about poetry as a kind of feminine art, right? And not we, but a lot of people do, right? And even if that's the case, great. It allows me to tap into something that I wasn't able to tap into before. On a larger level, I think about it in the sense of like almost all creative forms, right? It allows us to exercise different possibilities. It allows us to imagine different spaces, different worlds. Again, I was raised very Black Baptist Christian, and the first act we know of God is that God created. So for me, there is something sacred in the creative process. And it's about building new worlds. It's about imagining and working towards new possibilities. I'm not saying one poem will change the world. What I am saying is that poems can spark conversations that can lead to material change. And I believe that. I believe that to be wholesale. So I mean, but there's even other ways that I could think about this too, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. My question's kind of structural. In two of the poems, I noticed that you have these two primary elements that you balance against each other. So one was the Black boy and the sentence. The other was cancer and gentrification. I think there was a third. I don't remember my third example. But what? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
How dare you get his head?
I love it. So this like nice structure that you like, and I like it too. What attracts you to this kind of I guess you could call it dialogic, right? It's these two things that are in conversation with each other. But I feel like it allows you to say something other than what the two things are normally saying.
Yeah, so a friend of mine who's also a poet, we talked about this week. He has this, and I learned it from him, not the statement you're talking about, but this exercise when he tries to teach new writers how to write metaphors. And one of the things he'll do is like, we'll be in a room, and he'll be like, I'll pick an object in the room, and he wants you to metaphorize it, right? And he'll go, okay, great. After you come up with 3, he'll go, now give me 3 more, right? And he's gonna keep pushing you. And until you find like I can't, and he goes, okay, give me 1 more, and then he'll push you again, and he'll urge you. And what happens is you begin to see a ton of connections to one thing, and it forces you to just see this water bottle as so much more than just a water bottle, right? It becomes a container. It becomes about refreshment, and then refreshment tells us something, and the container tells us something. We could talk about plastic. We could talk about the thinner plastic in this moment. Like we could just keep and he keeps right? He keeps pushing it on you too. And so what happens for me in thinking about that is I am one of these people that's like I'm in my head a lot. Like I'm in my head a lot, like too much. To the point that I'm like people tell me you gotta chill. And I'm just always trying to think about connections to things. What makes a thing a thing? What gives it its thingness? What is it connected to? What is it possible? And so, you read about things, begin to read about a pound cake, and you go, huh. We talk about beating it. We talk about not overwhipping it. We talk about giving it structure. We talk about that sounds a lot to me like this other thing, right? At least in the verbiage, right? And then how could I metaphorize it? And in the middle of that, it's about extending a metaphor across just really extending the metaphor across the poem. That's all it really is at its basic level. And seeing how far I can stretch that. And sometimes it's about challenging myself about how far I can stretch that. Right? Like, can I keep pushing it? Can I keep pushing it? But what you all don't see is I often overwrite a poem and then I just start cutting back. So there's actually more metaphor to that in the elongated version in every one of those poems that you make.
The other thing I thought about was the tennis racket, right? With like tight strings.
Mm-hmm.
And they are the tight strings, so something it's really useful, right? You can get that ball across.
Yeah, and what it also does too, I mean, just on a sheer practical writing level, it just exercises the part of the brain that works on metaphor. It really does, right? Because you're pushing it, stretching it, and then oftentimes like the parts that are cut out are a lot of times the weakest parts that don't really. I'm like, that's kind of a stretch. Leave that on. I'm cutting before. That's okay. Yeah. But I do that a lot. I do like to do that. Bring these things that people don't know together. Especially, I do like to start with one thing. I have another poet friend who was like, "Yo, when I first read him the Pound Cake poem, literally we were just sitting there. And he was like, I'm waiting. He goes, I'm waiting. He kept saying it because he goes, I know at some point you're not talking about cake. I know you too well. This is not a poem about cake, man. He's like, you're stressing me out. But yeah, that's what it is. And then I saw yours.
I was thinking pretty much very similar about like similar concepts with T.S. was just in general about like having a subject and like a metaphor across the subject. And I guess I'm thinking in terms of your process, because sometimes I was listening and I also listened to one online. I think it's called Because He's Black.
Mm-hmm.
I came a little late, so I don't know if you guys.
No, it's all good. I did.
But and I was noticing it kind of felt as though there were almost like there are two simultaneous stories going on at the same time, and I'm wondering whether you write them. It almost felt as though you could have written them separately and kind of put them together that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering a little bit more about the process of like writing it out and like recording and how you memorize things like that.
So I don't write them separately. I don't have a process that I stick to, and this is the terrible part. I wish I did. I always tell people I wish I did have something. I'd be like, this is what I do. Practice it. I don't. I'm my whole life is vibes. You know, literally I just gotta do stuff. I'm like, that didn't work. Oh well. Okay, great, that worked. Keep doing that, right? What it is, I also dabble in writing for Hollywood, right? And one of the things we know in writing scripts is that you can't just come and show up with just an A plot. You gotta have a B plot, you gotta have a C plot, that's why I always in those movies, you ever look at an apocalyptic movie or show and somebody's in love and want to talk about love when they're about to die, it's like, this is not the moment, right? You know what I'm talking about? Like in Walking Dead, it's like a bunch of zombies, it's like, I love you. It's like, could you please get away from the zombies and then talk about the love? This is not the order of things, right? Because what they need is these multiple plots to play out, right? And so I think, one of the things I try to tell creatives is dabble in other forms of creativity and ask yourself, what do those other forms lend you your mode of creative practice, right? So what can writing TV scripts, if you try it, teach you about writing poetry? What can painting teach you about writing poetry? What can dancing teach you about writing? Like these things, they all offer something back to the craft, right? Does that make sense? And then in terms of like memorization and finishing, I have poems that I don't write to perform, so this is different than the ones I'm talking about right now. So the ones that I do perform, I don't finish those until I perform them in front of a bunch of different audiences. Because each time I'm gonna come back and edit, and I'm like, okay, this didn't feel right, that felt right. A poem lives in my body, right? A performance, a poem that I want to perform, it's as much about the page as it is how it feels in my body. And so I wanna be honest to that process and get it that. I'm not one of those that's like it has to just make sense on the page. No, if I'm gonna perform it, it needs to make sense in front of you as well. And so the performance part is part of the editing process for me too. But it's also part of the memorization part because this is probably now the 5th time I've performed that pound cake poem in public. It's kind of getting there. I still got a ton of edits I want to make. And then because I keep performing it, I start to memorize it that way too. And because I keep having to go after it and edit and read it over and over and over, it starts to get in my body. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I have another comment, but I'll
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's kind of like a two-parter. So I know that you probably have gotten comments about your performance angry or very passionate or aggressive or whatever, but I wanted to know how would you describe your performance styles and why you love performance?
I'll answer the second part first. One, I've never not known myself as a performer, right? So again, I grew up in a Black church, and anybody who's ever grown up in a Black church, they put the kids up to perform a lot. Pastor's Appreciation Day, you gotta go perform. It's anniversary day, it's Mother's Day, and I'm not talking about mothers as in the Mother's Day, I'm talking about like church Mother's Day. Then Mother's Day, then it's this day, it's that day, and we perform a lot. So I can't ever recall my life as a non-performer. The other part of it is too, that there's a beauty in live performance that I just absolutely love. There's an energetic exchange that I absolutely love, right? So I was talking with Michael earlier and Rosa earlier, like about what I'm gonna do, and it's like I'm just go up there and feel it because I wanna feel with you all, and I wanna go through a thing with you all, I wanna go through the journey with you all, as opposed to a pre-planned thing. Right? And sometimes it works and sometimes it don't, which goes back to my comment, my whole life is vibes. Sometimes it works and so like, I should have planned that out better. And that's okay, it's all good. And so that's what it is. It's just that there's this energy that I don't really know how else to explain it, that I feel, that I give and give back. In terms of how I describe myself as energetic, sometimes it is angry. And when people go, it's angry, I go, okay, and you know, I'm also one of those people like, I don't know why I can't be angry. Now, I can't, physically harm you because of my anger. I can be angry about something. Yeah. Like, I was been in this space where like, you're really angry. I was like, yes, and racism's messed up. You're not angry about that? Well, no, I'm not saying. Okay, now it feels weird, right? Right? So sometimes it is angry, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's joyous. It really all depends. I'm a human being with a series of complex emotions that don't always that can't be easily mapped, easily named with one word. And so I think the easiest way to explain it is energetic. I think that's probably the best way I can explain it. My best performances are the ones when I finish and I'm just utterly exhausted. I have a good time. If people think I'm like rude, I'm like, nah, I'm just tired. I want to go to sleep. I'm sorry. I'm not completely tired. But yes. Any others?
I do have another comment.
Oh, yes.
It's hard for me to think this through in my head, so I guess I'm just start saying it out loud. But it was regarding the first thing I think you responded to in terms of like family being a safe place for Black people
And I think of something that's coming up in regards to the other questions is kind of how that safe space is interrupted, challenged by like the real world. Like I think you relate, like your uncle, for example, and gentrification in your hometown, like thinking about them as like you're in this safe space. But then also, I feel like in your work, I also feel an acknowledgement of other lack of safety, which I think is really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, but is that not? I would argue true for Black folks in general, right? And I think, yeah, and so like what a way for me to say, at least I didn't know I was poor until I went to college and they told me I was poor. That's how good my family was with poverty. Right? Like my family was really good with poverty. I was like, oh shit, so we were poor. Right? And it's the ways in which I think part of, and certainly Black folks are the only way, but we're speaking about Black folks, are the only group, but we're speaking about Black folks. Part of the magic is the ways in which we make a thing out of a nothing kind of thing. And and you think about like we can use soul food as a metaphor, right? The ways in which we took terrible food and made it delicious. Oxtail is expensive now. Like that's a wild concept to me. The ass of the ox that no one wanted to eat is now expensive, that only poor folks eat. It's like, oh, it's delicious when you slow cook it. Right? And I think that metaphor is true of Black life and Black livability in this country. So much of Black life is intact and assaulted on a regular basis, and that the Black family in ways shelter children from that at times is utterly remarkable and incredibly resourceful. And again, this isn't to say that all Black family life is perfect. That's not my claim here, right? But it's to speak about that particular thing, about the ways in which we do that, if that makes any sense. Yeah, and I was just thinking when you said attack, I thought you said intact, and I think that's a very apt way kind of dialectic there. Yes. Yeah. No, and adding in chosen family too, right? Like I love the fact that I have cousins that ain't got no biological connection to me whatsoever, and that is my cousin. Period. That's my brother. Like, yeah. So absolutely, like, again, like my good friend, really friend Cisco. That's my brother. That's my dude. That's my. I don't know how else to explain. That's my guy. Like, yo, man, this dude is incredible, right? And that's a chosen brother. Because sometimes, I always tell people, I don't. And I said this earlier. I don't always like my family. Right? And so the family you're born into versus the family you choose. The family I choose, I kind of like pretty consistently. I'm like, oh, I made a choice. Yeah. But I like that intact thing. I'm going to sit with that. We'll end with this, if that's okay. On the night they decided not to indict Darren Wilson for the cold-blooded murder of Mike Brown, a well-framed riot, chose not to protest. Instead, I shut down everything, and like any good gospel conductor, I demanded a better harmony. The protests were in a part of Oakland I walked to nearly every day, but on that night, I closed the windows, could not deal with yet another choir lifting the rafters about more Black death. I didn't want to be sad, didn't want to be angry, didn't want white supremacy to tell me how to feel yet again. Instead, I fell asleep smiling, listening to Nina Simone and Otis Redding. That night, I cut off all the lights because Black was the only God I knew worth praying to ask. If Jesus be a Black woman, said the only people I know who can turn that small amount of food into feast are big mamas. We laugh, we joke, talk about bones and spades, about how all the old Black people, all Black women must be magic. Couldn't figure out why all the old Black men who I know smoke menthols know how to fix carburetors too. Smiled at how creative Black kids are. Said this world ain't never been safe, so we build new ones. out of bones, scrap paper, impossibility. Funny how we make survival look stylish, look dope, look damn good on that night. We dance on beat, which is to say on that night, we chose to be happy and black. When I first saw a man shot to death, his arms flailing wildly as if he danced for a god he knew he was about to see, what an unholy prayer his body was. Arms all in the wrong direction, but this poem isn't about Black Death. It isn't about on that night we listened to Tupac, imagine heaven is ghetto, corner stores draped in gold, and oceans of black faces smiling as wide as before the beginning, when it was still black. Little girls played double dutch, and him still dancing. When I awoke the next morning to an arrogant son, I called my mother because black is still the only gospel song I know worth singing. We laughed and said, I love you. I wanted her to know her baby boy was both black and both alive. And how political that phone call was. How political every phone call we make seemed to be, but this poem cannot be about politics, cannot be about black on black crime or the prison industrial complex. This is not a metaphor. It is simply about black love, about cookouts and fish fries, where all the black kids know all the dances before they even enter the world, about how black folks wear gold crowns in our mouths because we like to have regular brushes with royalty. This is about how at times the most revolutionary thing I can do is enjoy my niece's laughter, their brown faces bubbling like good fried bologna sandwiches, and ain't that like the blackest shit ever, y'all? This is about how when my brother came home from his tour in Iraq, the first thing we did was hug and make fun of each other when Tamir Rice was gunned down. Black people band together, lifted his mother out of the homeless shelter he was living in. She was living in when my aunt laid in her deathbed, waiting for the cancer to make a liar out of her own body. She sat there and cracked jokes because she knows that you cannot kill blackness. Too much of it is wrapped in an unshakable joy, and ain't that why they think we magic in the first place? That despite every reason not to, we still love. We still black, y'all. We still love. We still here. We still black. We still. Thank y'all very much for having me. It's been beautiful, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And let's continue the conversation at the reception.
Yay! Thank you, Rosa.